Hi, welcome back to my channel. So, I wanted to do a video as I haven't done one for a while. No, I have. I've done one really recently, but I always think if I'm inspired, I'm inspired, especially because I haven't done like a long period of time without I literally sometimes look back at my old podcasts. I like even watching them, so it's always fun. But anyway, I don't like to post crap, but I feel like I've just been going through this really deep spiritual awakening at the moment where I'm finding all these observations about people. I sort of did like a similar video, recorded one, but it never got uploaded, just because I couldn't export it where I was. But I feel like there's this massive power I'm finding in observing like your issue with someone else, and I think anyone could learn from this concept. Finding an issue with someone else, mirroring it back to yourself, and understanding that the universe and other people are always from moment to moment reflecting back to you yourself in some format or another, is one sort of mathematical way of looking at that. And so therefore emotions are an internal process, I would argue. I mean, they do say anger is evoked is a sort of a punishment you give yourself for someone else's behavior, but that kind of mentality aside, obviously stimuli will make you emotional, but it's still an internal experience, really. Not that it doesn't filtrate outwards, but the emotions that you have are your own, and that's like of your own free will. Done a recent podcast of managing your emotions in a format of sin, like wrath and stuff like that, and for your own peace of mind. But I feel like this type of thing I've been doing for a good while, and it's really powerful when looking at either it can just be an array of things, understanding other people and observing other people. I feel like the universe and other people in turn will bring you lessons about them, and that is them, and so you can observe other accurately or on your level accurately. But equally, I think that the that in the sense of oneness, the separation and the frustration from separation and the pain from separation, which can sometimes manifest into emotional stress, because the human mind, I think, it wants to understand things, and unknowing creates fear, which is a massive theme in spiritual awakening in general, but also in a form of anger. It's like if depending on things like personality and stuff, personality disorders, but also if you feel like you get frustrated about understanding someone, or you can't kind of socially adhere to some sort of social group because there's a disagreement within it, and there's a scapegoat of it or something, it can make you very angry, and that can come from any place. And I think from that level it's really important to mirror back what it is that's bothering you, because a lot of people do actually, knowingly or unknowingly, I would argue, mirror back to yourself anyway. Sometimes it's just a level of eccentricity where a lot of people in their narcissism, for example, might be like, okay, well, I'm got the monopoly on everyone, and me, and I feel fantastic myself. Excuse my little voice, but I have, monopoly on everyone else, and therefore I need to inform you of what you're doing wrong. You're on the wrong level. You need to stop being so angry. You know how the narcissistic spiel goes. I've got all these attacking demonic forces as a narcissist, and I will perpetuate. You're the problem. You're the angry one. You're bitter. You're unworthy. You're stressed out. You're struggling. This, that, and the other. We all have these emotions, but equally, someone that is highly narcissistic will perpetuate this narrative. You're the problem. I'm this sweetness and light organism, or everything is perfect and wonderful. You're the problem, and that's never going to change my internal pathology, and that being what it is. And that will annoy someone, and obviously it will create ideas. But I think the idea, especially for coming from Pisces, is this very strong eccentricity within Pisces itself. There being a large format of illusion surrounding Pisces means that the the contrast to which we are able to box. So if someone's annoying, right, that sort of process goes down, be that in Pisces or Aquarius. We've moved from astrological eras from Pisces to Aquarius. you know, whether that happens in Pisces or Aquarius, in Pisces it was easier to box that further down the road. They're completely out of my vicinity, they're completely out of my space, and I don't need to own any of my narcissistic traits because they're doing all that for me. I'll just let them go down that train and I'll just sit here and hence other problems, which for me for rose free Pisces has been a lot more confidence found in many people, because people with narcissism may not feel that they have to suppress their narcissism. People with, which does have functionality to it, people without narcissism, potentially more highly empathic, are able to express that without feeling that they have to appease a narcissist by bringing themselves down a few pegs, which has created confidence in many ways for the collective in general, and is a relieving and necessary benefit, I would argue, to this astrological era. However, the way that even so, not personality disorders aside, to one degree, because this is not, you know, though I've done many videos on narcissism and things like that, it's not about hating a personality disorder. It's about, for me, this is understanding the universe. I just like to look at it from that perspective as well. So I also think it's important, interesting perspective to also talk about. But also think, you know, from any level, you know, I can't do or work for a narcissist, you know, whatever they're feeling, because a lot of the time I know that from my knowledge, a lot of their pathology works on, I mean, you look at personality types, because I did a video on this quite a while ago about alpha, beta, um, omega, gamma, this, that, and the other. Betas work on a particular frame of brain pathology, on a frame of, you know, specifically work in groups, work on a specific collective. Alphas work alone. I'm an alpha. I've done a video on being an alpha. Done that channel for a while, and that being the case, you know, we all have obviously slightly different formats to which we will categorize and actually look to organize our thoughts and perceptions to one degree through that, and many other probably formats we could look at that. But to not get too digressive, to also look at it as you know, I believe that from what I've understood about narcissists, especially through spiritual awakening, is the way that they, I mean, it's very similar though, and to integrate the level of oneness of, I always talk about seeing an experience as a mirror, right? But that will come from my particular mentality. I have been informed through spiritual community somewhere that narcissists see everything as a mirror. So they see one person, but they see it through the format of narcissism, right? So we're looking at people with a very specific mindset, okay? And it's this person I see. So maybe if I'm threatened, so say I'm a narcissist, yeah, potentially I'm threatened as a narcissist by a particular person, okay? So therefore I'm perceiving that they're threatened by me, not I'm threatened by them. They're very good at flipping this astrological era. I question, and I am seeing, because I think in a lot of spiritual connections videos and enlightenment through spiritual connections focuses a lot on duality and the idea of contrast. And I'm very big and I talk a lot about contrast. And I think narcissists at this level, they're very good at contrast, so they're very good at, you know, right. So accurately, they perceive that their mental health will be stabilized if they are able to take that mental break after pursuing the situation, and but they're very good at projecting. They're very good at projecting. If they're threatened by you, not to say that every narcissist is, but say for example something about you is threatening to them, they're threatened by me, and various other things will go on along that same line. It will be this constant perpetuation. No, I'm not threatened by you. You're threatened by me. So can't you understand? You're threatened by me. Look at all these things about me. You're threatened by. Blah, blah, blah. Look at you. Wow, I want to see that you're threatened by me. This, that, and the other will perpetuate this spiral of delusion. But if a narcissist, right, or anyone else, this is my thought, and what I do is to say, right, well, if I perceive that this person is threatened by me, there's this lack of ability to perceive one's own thoughts as their own rather than a projection of other within narcissism. For many, apart from if you're a self-aware narcissist, which is very few and far between from the research I've seen, but this level of, to say, you know, so from that level I will stop talking about narcissists, because narcissists will do this in their own particular way, but they do it in that way though, that where they say, you know, I'm seeing the universe, this or this person in the universe so other, as a mirror to myself. So, this person is threatening, that must mean I'm threatening. Okay, cool. And in a level that makes sense, because in a sense you do attract what you are, what you're fearing, what you're used to. So potentially could be attracting what you fear. And this is the dysregulation that we encounter with narcissism, but you could be attracting what you fear if you're encountering something that you're threatened by. However, in theory, karma is to say that if you're encountering something threatening, you've probably threatened something else or someone else in the immediate past or future, or further back past or whatever. And so therefore this is the kind of mindset that they work from, and it's the format of thinking. So it's very much the same thing, really. But I think from anyone's level because I wrote down a load of notes in part to clear my mind, because I think I was coming to this realization from a spiritual awakening level. But to basically write down the what was annoying me, basically. And I think on a law of attraction level, and I've spoken about this before, to write down your innermost thoughts as accurately and vulnerably as you possibly can, it really helps this ability to avoid in the future these fearful experiences coming back round, because you've got sort of a kind of end goal to where you've looked at worst case scenarios. So a lot of the time when people resist their own feelings and their own experiences, those same experiences will sort of loop back around on a level of you attract what you fear. If you fully kind of explore what you fear, it's that the fear complex does not actually return back round to you, and you don't expect those things. So that's the logic of it, university, because the universe will compassionately reflect back to you what you haven't processed, and that can be seen as a gift on level. Um, but yeah, just I do think there's this balance which is slightly different now in the astrological era change, of this balance between lies and truth, truth and lies, and also eccentricity and exemption. So I think because there's a few sort of things that I've been sort of pondering through my spiritual awakening, and I think on some level we all work in this sort of loop cycle, where depending as a person, which type of person you are in, whatever category you may base that, you may exempt or kind of eccentrify another person for something that they do, but also you might ignore that if you're a different type of person. So on a level of mental blindness, and I've sort of talked about this a little bit before, where I think mental blindness appears in other people, it appears in the universe, and it appears just in general, which is why we all have slightly different perception. From a mental blindness level, this is where like some people's actions may make absolutely no sense to someone that's literally sat right next to them, just because their perception is different, their life path is different, their goals are different, their vulnerabilities are different, their strengths are different. And in that sense, it's actually not necessary for one person to perceive the level of another person. And I think at that point, 333, I always see angel numbers, this is angels surrounding you. But I think on a level, it's actually an important lesson to direct you back to the universe, because the universe is this level of oneness. There's no, the human mind and the ego is very much based around hierarchy, about winning, about, I'm better than you, I fit here, you fit here. Not even I fit here, you fit here, but it's very distracted often by trauma and by lies and all that. But the universe is very pure. It brings a whole lot of oneness, and it directs you very much to truth, and it directs you very much to what is in the atmosphere. It's a very neutral concept, I would argue, the universe itself. And I think it sort of is the universe's way of saying, hey, get out of your ego a bit, listen to the neutrality of the universe, sort of thing. Um, but so I had some. I feel like they can seem a bit sadistic, but I think part of the universe I'm starting to see is slightly sadistic on any level, and I think it's okay to accept that within each person there is some level of sadism, to each of our perception based on our priorities, and none of which actually would probably count as entirely truthful or entirely untruthful, because of the innate oneness of the universe and the sort of lack of the universe kind of backing this level of inferiority. At the core, it's more about truth and resonance, rather than inferiority and dominating. That's not really where the universe is. That's more an ego complex. But I think um, when it comes to um, understanding how ego works in other people, because I think through spiritual awakening it is also important to have some awareness of how any human ego, I would argue, works, because you can apply this to you can apply this to yourself, you can apply this to your past self, you can apply this to people that may have traumatized you in the past, or God forbid the future, which is guaranteed, I would argue, on some level. But it brings it's this level of spiritual awakening which is very logistic, and actually probably part of sort of it's more of an observation. I think it would come from the level of not your past perceptions, but awakening to what is. I would argue it comes from that level. Then comes the level of transcendence, and then comes the level of reintegration. But I think it's really hard to transcend something that you don't understand, is the idea from spiritual awakening. And I heard this idea of I can't actually remember what it's called now, Negrello or something like that, Negrello or something. It's a phase of spiritual awakening that some people refer to, which is to do with this idea of like attaining this blackness from a level of like not exhaustion, but so much as finding sort of the metaphysical death within your own ego before finding whitening and reddening, to the point where you transcend is the whitening and the reddening is the practicality to the situation. Which I really liked, because I think it's very satisfying to die to yourself. It's a massive theme in like the Bible, like it says those that die to themselves and give themselves to God will survive, and those that don't will die. So it's a very heavy theme in religion, and I would argue in a lot of spiritual practices as well. It's very much about, taking yourself away from and there was actually a beautiful Bible quote actually, which I do want to share, even though I don't push Christianity. It was something like, in every way look to God, and obviously this is a Bible quote, I'm not pushing Christianity, but it really sort of struck me in a way. It, in every way look to God for your path, and it will be made straight. And I don't know, I think there was more to it than that, but I was sort of like, it was this idea that she was talking about around that of finding truth, because there's so many lies in the universe, and at the end of the day, whether you want to consider something a lie or a truth to one person, I do, as I say, from this level of mental blindness, what one person will resonate with, another person won't resonate with, and you could argue that then, in essence, that person is lying. From person to person, one person is lying when another person is telling the truth. Do you know what I mean? That could be the level that you perceive something on. Whether it's an innate lie is a different story, but a universal lie would be a different story. It'd be more of a personal lie. But equally, to follow truth and your own truth as an individual. I've seen people talk about on YouTube at the moment that a lot of people aren't being validated by the collective for their own personal experience at this time, because we're going through this time of further individuation, where we're looking to validate our own path and find our own truth. More so through COVID and everything, that's people started to do that quite powerfully. But this astrological change has been going on since the 60s, some people say. But yeah, this level where you can look, excuse me, at your truth and look to whatever makes sense for you, the universe, God, yourself, other for perception. I would argue looking at other for your truth would be, and even yourself to one degree. And I literally just did a podcast about this, about the need for a savior, a complex of God, some sort of religion to one degree, spirituality to one degree, to save you. Because, and I've said in the idea of Christianity, sometimes Jesus, because people look for a savior. You cannot save yourself in this universe. There's too much attack externally and internally that you would need some sort of source to, for some people to, and I would argue for myself, to transcend and live through this life. I would argue, especially in times of darkness, it's important, I think, through spiritual awakening to acknowledge those things, and many people do get to that point. But anyway, to perceive, so because there was these sort of contrasts and polarities, I don't know how much of this is backed by psychology, but let's just go into them, because I think I always like to hear how these type of things sound back at myself, so I can be like, okay, yeah, no, that sounds really weird and off the wall, but realistically that makes a lot of sense. so so to what degree, and I would argue that anyone does this to whatever level, and it's cool to measure yourself at others. So I would observe, and I did observe, that the level to which people place themselves ignorantly, aka outside of other people's expectations, above others, is in alignment with their perceived lack of confidence and vulnerability. Um, so that would look at anyone, and sometimes I think you can have mental blindness for yourself. Because I think sometimes when we do feel vulnerable and lack confidence, you do innately, your ego complex is to compensate sometimes through whatever reason. People say that you can either compensate um, through kind of through like massive compensation, trying to compensate, having a social status, or people pleasing. And so some people, will kind of, if they lack confidence and they have vulnerability or something, they will try and attain this very powerful social status, or they will people please. So you ever see people like lick arse massively? That's a coping strategy, and I think, yeah, that it can apply to anyone too. Um, the I put the word sad behaviour, obviously, as a perspective to which some people display is in correlation to how their lives have been aggrieved, to which I shouldn't really care. So some people, when anyone judges someone, I had this level of recognition of shame of other, but also myself. So I had this level where I would look to other people, in my own sin, and unmatched of the divine in terms of Christianity, as we are all beneath beneath Jesus, and we are all below we all fall short of the glory of God, I think it says, actually, from a Christian level. But in my own humility, I would find that I was getting to the point where I was judging people and I was holding shame for them, because I have this ability to sort of perpetuate and mirror to someone, or of someone, to take on this experience I perceive in another, whether it be accurate or not accurate. I think sometimes you can actually, maybe, you could inaccurately observe. I'm sure I did a video about this. Yeah, I did. I think in my last video of this idea of perceiving people on a level that is most beneficial for them and yourself. It can be a skill and a level of spiritual awakening sometimes to look outside of yourself and observe the benefits and positive attributes of other that aren't the same as yours, can be beneficial. But I think that's a level where I would argue you must make space and potentially grieve the negative attributes of those first, in order to facilitate where the positive attributes may then stem for potentially some people, especially people that differ to you. I would argue we all have this sort of level to which, when one person is one way, I would argue the next day that person is the same way, and then the next day some other person is the same way, so the next day some other person is the same way, and so on. I do think I have seen these cycles, but when you're not going through that same experience on a perpetual level and you don't have that synchronicity, I think it can be harder to perceive people. This is maybe why some people perceive people more accurately. They're some more similar to themselves than others. Um, so yeah, when I say sad behavior, I just mean, what I would perceive as being shameful. If someone has been aggrieved, and I look at myself, if I've been aggrieved by something, which isn't actually another person's fault to take on, You know, I may act sad, I may act shameful or something. But also is the case for other, one may argue, because sometimes when people act sad and they act shameful, you know, you can be like, well, you know, it can be distressing actually to a point if someone is acting that kind of out of alignment and actually, you know, in this desperation energy, it can be quite jarring sometimes or shocking. And it's like you just have to allow that this person has been aggrieved for some reason. Maybe someone's disagreed with them, their ego complex has been damaged to some degree, or they've had a negative life experience, which we all have. Again, integrating that oneness, it's like, yes, you could judge a person for being aggrieved, attribute it to something like narcissism, but you can also be like, do you know what? We all have these arguments. We all feel defeated on a level because of the innate challenges that we all experience. You know, and this is also part of the exploration of this type of stuff. It's about this integration of, yes, I can observe this from another, that's a gift. I've been able to experience this for another. I can also apply it to myself and actually hold space for myself and other. I think this is the growth that I'm starting to go through at the moment. To hold space for another, I have to be able to hold space for myself, but because of this mental blindness, I may not be able to know what I need to hold space for past a point. I've done a lot of self-exploration. Look at my past podcasts. I've really tried to look at everything internally that I can, but I think sometimes when it comes to interpersonal interaction, it's not always possible to judge that if you're only interacting with yourself. So, and then so the control to which someone pushes is in correlation to the lack of control they have within themselves. So, yeah, I mean, because I always like to consider the idea of eccentricity and exemption to this as well, because I think potentially for some people, the control to which they may create for themselves within a situation which so when we look at spiritual levels, I feel like some people largely interact in this demonic level and some people interact in more of an angelic level without kind of going into too much kind of detail within that. But I think within that, from my study of demonology, which has been not very long and needs to continue, is there are different class levels of demons. A lot of, so you get sort of like thrones, so people that sort of like sit back and so level of demons, a category of demons that sit back and sort of perpetuate this experience, or they look over this experience. You get presidents within demonology, different types of demons that are sort of presidents, so they sort of rule an area of some sort of experience. You get various sort of levels to which these demons operate, and they vary for like angels, because you get sort of ruling angels of these demonic entities. But I would argue that most of us have this demonic level that we also operate in. It may not be our prime level that we operate in, but on some level we will operate in this demonic level, and and some of us aren't actually as in touch with it as others. So I'm trying to learn about it. But I think on that level, it sort of creates this because I think you see sometimes when you observe, it's observed in things like narcissism, where you'll get someone that is blindly perpetuating lies, but you'll find this whole random group of people will just agree with them blindly, and you just sort of watch it and you're just like, what is going on? This is just not grounded in any sort of common sense or anything. Like, what is happening? But then when you look at it of a level of demonology, like this is probably very normal, like especially if you get, you know, demons of the same, you know, or the same type of demon, or you know, if you if, again, I don't want to digress too hard, but if you believe that, you know, you have past lives and sometimes you're reincarnated as demons and stuff, you could get a whole group of people that's incarnated as the same brand of demon, the same demon, in order for your soul evolution. And then obviously, yeah, they're all going to sort of cluster together, even if it's not based in physical truth, if that makes sense. And that's a massive aha moment for a lot of us, where we're like, well, this is just completely nonsensical. So right, so that can be a level of control that some people push. And so instead of, you know, you could argue that, you know, if you look at it from a psychological level, it's narcissism. but and that they lack control within themselves. Or you could look at it from a more spiritual level. You could say the control that some people have, because I've heard that a lot of people as well, they scapegoat people that have more of an angelic mentality, and they say, oh, they're holier now, they think they're better than everyone, this, that, and the other. And then you'll get people that are potentially friends with them and stuff, and they sort of cluster together on this level that may be perceived as superiority complex, or feeling holier than now, or higher than now, or whatever. And I understand that can be a perception, and it might not seem humble, and I would argue there is truth in that, because I feel like I haven't been humbled in the past, and I have found myself to be humbled to the point where that could be perceived as control, especially if you are using judgment to attack other people. And I find that's still something that I battle with, to be honest, and it is judgment, and it is against my beliefs if I incorporate Christian beliefs. I have many religions and things that I refer to, but I was brought up a devout Catholic, so that was sort of my indoctrination religiously. Next, the sad superiority one tries to push is to the degree that they feel unprioritized. So again, I think when you talk about demonic oppression, when you think of a level of karma, if you are embodying the energy, demonic energy, the chances are, if you oppress other, you will also on a human level, because we're not demons in this incarnation. I would argue that you may experience oppression, and so therefore, it may be a shameful superiority, or they may feel unprioritized because they feel oppressed to some degree. So to have like a shameful sort of superiority complex that quote unquote you try and push, whether that's a demonic level, or a demonic kind of incarnation level, which is understandable to one level. It's a category of demonic energy and spiritual kind of expression, if that makes sense. I haven't really gone too far into this concept, so trying to get too kind of a little bit careful about what kind of spirituality I incorporate on this channel, in case it's sort of misperceived as too new agey. So I've experienced native things with the new age. I've done a video about that as well, where I titled New Age to Jesus video. Don't advocate new age, because it can be quite scary if you don't know what you're doing. The minimized experience in other places on me is to the degree that they feel lesser than in comparison. So how long is this list? We might not be able to get through all of them. No, it should be right. Okay, so the minimized experience in other places on me is to the degree that they feel lesser in comparison. So yeah, again, when we talk about demonic oppression and minimization to any degree, someone will perpetuate that. Hurt people hurt people. If you are demonically oppressed and you are minimized, or you are unknowing, actually, I would argue, or have mental blindness in an area, you will perpetuate that on other, whether it's true or not. And I can accustom that to myself. If I'm not to one level of resonance that another person would be innately, I would probably deny that within not only myself but them as well. And I can hold myself to that, but I would argue the same thing happens to me, and that is also a part of natural contrast and individuality in life. So I'm not trying to take away from that, but I think the issue comes when you sort of have this internal battle of, there's actually a name for it. It's a German name, where you have this argument between you and some other person in your head, of maybe some sort of energy exchange. You imagine some sort of argument or discussion, like angry discussion in your head. There's a name, it's Schadenfreude. I don't know if that's the right word. Please don't shame me. I literally, I can't remember if it's that or if it's a different word, but I'm going to go with the word Schadenfreude at the moment. It's where you have this sort of like mental argument, the word I'm talking about. I have a feeling it's not Schadenfreude, but anyway, we'll go with that. So that's pretty straightforward, really. The annoying mess someone creates is in correlation to the vulnerability and helplessness that they feel in that situation. I'm just talking about those people, like, to say if anyone would have a meltdown, I would argue we all have meltdowns about different things. And it could display in things like panic attacks. It could display it through mental health means such as like that. But other people may just have sort of histrionic tendencies and things like that. So, but equally, it can be, because like sometimes, I'm quick to judge people when they have a histrionic moment, and then they, a lot of people gather around them and say, oh, you're having as if they're dealing with vulnerability and helplessness. Because I think, well, you're creating this, and it could just easily be like a boomer thing, where I'm sort of, because I think the issue for me is the boy that cried wolf. I think of narcissism. Narcissists are very vulnerable and they have vulnerable states of mind, not necessarily some vulnerable states of mind, but they have a tendency to perpetuate through that eccentricity or through lies or some other format. This this they're not great. I would argue clearly communicating their intentions. They can go about things in quite a mischievous way, and so for that reason, when they actually do display genuine vulnerability and helplessness, it can be quite uh, a boy that cried wolf kind of situation for me, because maybe they probably don't want my attention anyway, because I think a lot of them can take a lot of shame on that, to be honest. And maybe this is how the natural kind of course of things rolls out, and I'm okay with that. Same with me, to be honest. We all have a healthy level of narcissism, and if some randomer sort of starts observing my helplessness and vulnerability, I don't think I'd like it. I'd rather than just ignore it, to be honest. um, the irritability someone has in one situation is in correlation to the dysregulation they feel or that they wish to displace, aka control. Yeah, generally, if someone's irritable, I would argue that, well, for whatever reason, be that because they're triggered by someone, or they are irritated naturally by someone else's annoyingness, or they're fed up, or they're tired, or whatever reason, they generally want to displace that on other people. I'd argue, even from like an inner child level, if you're in a child or any child really is irritable, they'll probably want to displace that in order to sort of display that or displace it to some degree or another if people aren't good at. But I suppose the shadow work there is to say within yourself, if you are feeling irritable, to express it at a level where you're able to interact with your inner child and say, I'm feeling irritable. So at the end of the day, I don't have to displace that because I see that within myself. I've seen this technique recently, whether it's a disturbing image or a disturbing memory within your head, or a thought that you sort of want um to bypass or something, to view it and to see it, to acknowledge it and say, I see you, thought, but I can carry on through this situation and have like breathing exercises and reaffirm yourself. It's a really powerful way to move through difficult memories and pathology that you might otherwise kind of avoid and create these trees of trauma around, which I've done videos about trees of trauma as well. So the discomfort someone makes you feel is in correlation to the discomfort they feel around you and the distance they choose to create and the other factors incorporated. Let's read that again. The discomfort someone makes you feel is in correlation to the discomfort they feel around you and the distance they choose to create and the other factors incorporated. So yeah, I suppose if someone makes you feel uncomfortable, you will create discomfort for them in order to create that repulsion. And again, it's a natural level of let people be people, I think, within that. And I think some people probably, I mean, I think to anyone that's normal human behavior. If someone's made you feel uncomfortable for them, it's that level that we all have separation to allow that. Um, Also maybe for a shallow work level, to understand what it is that someone is making you feel, why they're making you feel uncomfortable. Is it something within them? Is it something that you can mirror back to yourself? Is it because they embody a trait that you don't own within yourself, that you may be able to identify and then reclaim? Because I think a lot of the time the universe brings you different types of people to remind you of who you are actually, and they mirror you in a level to be like, okay, this is what you are. Or even the experience they create actually is a reminder of the person that you are. And I can also claim that for myself. I'm sure the universe has orchestrated experiences where I have reflected back to people who they are, and I will take that as a win for my contribution to the universe, for one degree or another. The first one makes around themselves is in correlation to the attraction they have to oneself. Yes, I would argue that is the case for anyone. Pretty self-explanatory, I'm not going to go into that. The focus they set on someone else, the focus someone sets on someone else is to the degree they wish to dominate and therefore are inferior. Yeah, I feel like from this level of like bullying, or focus that's unnecessary to another person, um, if you're focusing on someone unnecessarily for like no reason, it's often because people want to dominate them. It could be for a reason, there could be a reason behind it, but it's also that they are feeling inferior at that time, whether it's because they're triggered or because um, some other reason. The focus, could argue that two people mutually get into an argument or they trigger each other mutually, and then there's this sort of stare down or something, and that's on a level of focus that you set on someone else. Or you could just get someone very dysregulated and very confused and very slow to acknowledge the mental blindness of themselves to set this blind focus upon someone, and combined with things like narcissism and sociopathy, create this uncomfortable and perpetuating the kind of petulant experience for another person, which is often the case. And I have experienced many times. The degree to which a person tries to rally up to attack someone is to the degree they feel entitled. Some people can be entitled, others aren't, based on your perception, and that is valid. So, based on your perception being valid, so I would agree, and I think sometimes, especially from a Piscean level and an illusionary level, to feel that you are amongst a group of people that you resonate with, whether it's to kind of put a type of situation or other to rights without kind of a confrontationary or kind of aggressive way, but in a separate place, which you could argue is like gossiping, but it can feel kind of uncomfortable, because I think a lot of people that have an unhealthy mindset or do have this vicious or delusional mindset can also do that. And it is to the degree at which you feel entitled. You can feel a healthy level of entitlement, or you can feel an unhealthy level of an entitlement. As a human being, one would argue through a psychological level, as in a lot of people do feel entitled to attack other people through their own trauma, misunderstanding their own trauma, and kind of blaming that on someone else, trying to displace their own feelings. And I would argue that that would be unhealthy entitlement. But some people feel entitlement to a healthy level to which they are justified to experience their truth in a just level. We're all kind of, again, I would argue that's a moral thing and potentially personal moral thing, but I think on a collective level, to one degree or another, there's always some sort of moral level, to the point where you can either be unfair between person to person, or you can be fair between person to person. I think that's generally understood and recognised and agreed on topic, that you can be out of order if you are grossly entitled about something. The degree to which someone holds a grudge is to the degree they won't look at themselves for their side of the problem. I would say this is the case. Again, pretty self-explanatory. So I guess the shadow work here would be to, if you're holding a grudge towards someone, to identify what it is that's bothering them, and again do this sort of mirror level again to say, okay, so I've done that underneath, to say more specifically, this person is annoying to me because of X, Y, and Z issue, and to see if any of that resonates with how I perceive myself. So yeah, to say like, this person is annoying because they are perpetuating lies. Am I annoying myself because I'm perpetuating lies about myself? So that will trigger me. Once I dissipate that and I hold that within myself, I neutralize that, that will dissipate the annoyance that I perceive from other. The degree to which one person makes a show of themselves is to the degree they desire attention. Right. Again, similar to what I said about in the past, I'm going to leave that where it is. The degree to which people stonewall is the degree to which they make themselves the priority and therefore are threatened by that person. Yeah, I mean, this comes down to the basic scapegoating of human groups I've seen, as in, if a group of people, and I think some people sort of can work much more on this patterns level, where they sort of preconceive someone to be out of the realms of how they perceive their own chosen experience in group. So they may sort of very quickly perceive that they are not of the same mindset and quickly kind of stonewall. And so yeah, I do think though people can do this in order to prioritize themselves, because at this level, I suppose that if you stonewall someone, it sort of puts them in this position on a social level to be the one that levels up, to be the one that sort of caters to and says, hey, like, I can go about things and try and compensate for your issue. What is it that I've done wrong? This, that, and the other. and it's quite manipulative, and a lot of people see through it, especially quickly if they realize that that's not going to be something that they're going to achieve, because a lot of people, that's not really the kind of outcome that's desired by the other party. It's often just to get that sort of, again, attention, that sort of fuss, or that distance, to be honest. And they may well be threatened. Their ego complex may be threatened. They may not be quite on the level. They may be misperceive the level. They may have a feeling of superiority. All things that I've sort of mentioned from past quotes. The degree to which someone blames another without relent is to the degree that they are not looking at themselves or probably coping at all. Sort of touched on that already. The degree to which someone tries to break another down is the level they feel dominant. Yeah, I think this is slightly different because, you know, anyone can feel dominant, again, for justified or unjustified reasons, I would argue, morally and in truth, in sort of actually universal truth and practical truth. But I think just because someone feels dominant doesn't give them the right to break another person down, but it can be an explanation as to why they try and break someone down. And again, I think this is this healthy level of aggression and assertiveness that some people can struggle to actually integrate when they find that a lot of people, by contrast, in Pisces, have kind of overly acted aggressive, especially if they're of the narcissistic persuasion, to the point that, let's not forget that narcissists and anyone will be eccentric, and, you know, narcissists realize that, you know, they are social creatures within their own level, and, you know, they may well be being eccentric by kind of taking too much of the social gas. If, you know, there's a lot of introverts that would rather not be involved, especially in something like the Piscean era, where it's a lot more easy to just hide behind vulnerability and sensitivity. Whereas in Aquarius, it's sort of facilitating anyone else coming out their shell, holding their truth, especially with this asteroid called Eris in Aries. It very much pushes everyone into their innermost truth. But it's like, um, yeah, it just because someone it feels dominant doesn't mean that they're entitled to attack, and to learn to live humanistically, aka not animalistically, and act with tact and control and humanism. But some develop that at earlier stages than others. I think this was a concept that I've sort of now sort of started to integrate to the point where, you know, on whatever level, I think it just comes down to person and a level of development. This is why you look at some people and think they look very mature at a very young age, whereas other people, it takes them longer to level out and to find themselves morally and to find themselves humanistically, to the point where, you know, you may be sort of not really going to get very far if you argue with someone that's immature, or they're not grounded in their own truth, to the point where, you know, if you're trying to, you know, act humanistically with someone that's only going to act animalistically with you, there's not much point in trying to argue with it, just to be able to tolerate it to some degree or ignore it to some degree, whatever makes sense to you. I'm not saying that you should tolerate things you shouldn't tolerate, but to navigate that in the healthiest way for you is the only way really to go for it. And I think this level of dominance then does actually apply to someone, between someone that's acting animalistically and humanly, which is often where the law comes in, to be honest. I think a lot of people act animalistically in an environment where it's only socially acceptable to act humanistically, to be honest. You know, if you decide to attack someone out of the blue for any reason, you'll probably be held to the law, as you probably should be. You know, and that teaches you to learn a level of humanism, even if it doesn't naturally resonate for you, to understand that on some level that needs to apply. Otherwise, you will find yourself in prison. I suppose that's just a way that we will have to function on some level. The degree to which someone attempts to take what is important to another is to the degree they feel unworthy of something themselves. And I think, yeah, this is the case. And I don't know if it's eccentricity to one degree, where if someone feels unworthy of a situation, because I feel like I've been here before, if they feel unworthy of a situation, they will kind of perpetuate this situation where they might try and attain it from a level of, like, they're in a child or they're in a teenager or something. It's kind of going like, you know, I will try and attain it, but I can't attain it because, you know, it's not something I feel worthy of. That's sort of their own divine acceptance, or their own innate acceptance to one degree on a spiritual level, to the point where that can actually be perceived as again, this is why it's important, I think, to acknowledge the eccentricity and the exemption of people. And I suppose that from a level of natural individuation, there is some level of exemption that does apply to some people. I would argue that some people take that level of exemption and that eccentricity too far, and they sort of can be quite triggering when doing so. But again, if you're stuck with this level of animalism and you haven't kind of got a defined moral compass, that will probably happen, and that's why navigating people with personality disorders, as the case may be in some cases, is necessary. Not to say that anyone that is maybe not completely developed on a moral sense may have a personality disorder, but you get my drift. The degree at which someone balks against the truth is the degree they're unable to see it. Again, it's convicting on a level, because it's like, well, to what degree do I not facilitate being open to the world's truths because of resentment or mental blindness I may hold to from the past. We all have priorities, so I'm not being funny to see the abundantly, perpetuating joy and self-love that another person has for themselves in a situation where you've got like a million other things to worry about. It's not necessarily, necessary, but I think it can help you from day to day open your mind and keep a more relaxed mind and be more receptive to other people. And as they say, those positive attributes that it's good to bolster within other people once you get to that point of spiritual awakening, rather than perpetuating your own only because of the sense of oneness, especially in relationships that you have. So if you notice that but then trauma comes into this. If you walk against a truth, it can be because you've got a generational line of people that have hard hearts, or they have trauma against something, generational trauma, like cultural trauma, something like that, where it's worth looking, if you're walking against something, what it is that's blocking you. Because I would argue it's more of a block. If you're unable to see something, it's that lack of third eye enlightenment, to the point where your heart space is blocked against connecting with that oneness, I suppose. Your root chakra connecting to the reality of the situation. Just last couple now. The relentlessness someone shows against you is to the degree that they have to show their victimhood. Yeah, I would argue, when this idea of if someone's in a bad place, they can act out at the person closest to them. And that could be because they are traumatized and damaged, or it could be for other reasons, personality issues, this, that, and the other. The degree at which someone has to prove themselves and perpetuate their truth to others is to the degree they feel they need support. Yeah. So again, in social groups, you'll either be accepted or not accepted based on the groupthink mentality, whether you tick enough of those boxes to become part of the group. That's just a natural human mechanism for people. And that is up to the group. But I would argue that, if you do need support, this is why it's important to find community that resonates. And, if you have an interest in, sewing, to talk to a bunch of bikers about that, you probably won't find much resonance. So it's to the point, if you want to find support in that area to try and prove yourself to a bunch of people that aren't interested and they don't resonate, that won't be functional. So I suppose that's the shadow work. If you're trying to prove yourself to a bunch of people, and it could come to any level, it can come from an interest, or it could come from just a truth, an innate truth. It's to look at the fact that to perpetuate your truth, well, you need support, and I think it's normal to one degree to try and be perpetuating your truth to people that you're in the same circles with and have disagreements about where your truth resonates. That's kind of the natural contrast between people. So there is that. But I think especially when people really get very frustrated and they're trying to push this narrative, it could be also because you're dealing with a bunch of dysfunctional people that are sort of again on this level where they're going to perpetuate this group lie because it sort of serves the demonic elements and the mischievous humour to which I suppose many serve, and I suppose is necessary to one degree. The degree at which they perpetuate their denial is to the degree to which they cannot process the situation at that time because of their ego not letting them. Yeah, because it could be a level of just mental processing being slow, but it could be a level of just their ego isn't prepared to look at that at this time for whatever reason. And I would argue there's a natural individuation to that as well. We're not all supposed to have the same mental processes at the same time, because we're not all these firework experiences that just go off at the same time. We're all supposed to have these contrasting experiences, and I would argue there is a level to which just because some person has a level of sadism, I think I'm very good and well practiced. It's easy to get this way, especially when I'm perpetuating these experiences to other people, which I perceive of other to as a validating concept. It's a dysfunction of empathy, I would argue, that I attain. But we have a high level of mirror neurons. Those of us that I would argue that we all have a level of empathy, but those of us that have very high levels of empathy in particular situations, we have these very high levels of mirror neurons. And so they may kind of, I know it's worth wrangling those a bit, but the degree to which someone perpetuates denial is to the point where their ego is not letting them process the situation, would be the case, I would argue. And I think what I was trying to say was, if it's very easy to hold on, especially from a Piscean level, this illusionary level, rather than in Aquarius where we sort of are liberating to ourselves and other, to hold space for the sadism of another, even if it's not necessarily relevant or true, actually, and if it could actually be a lie. And it lowers self-esteem, and I'd argue it creates too much separation, because I would argue there's this, I suppose, from a spiritual awakening level, you would argue this level of separation which is healthy, but this over separation in the spiritual community, it's well perpetuated that it causes pain, because of this level of oneness. If you have these lies, if you have these unresonating experiences, it creates this level of pain internally, because you're separating from oneness. And I suppose the degree that soul perpetuates denial because of their ego, you can perpetuate denial of your own positive attributes, of positive attributes within another. There's a sense to say give to receive, but also if you're not a natural people pleaser, that might not be the only way you can go about something. If you deny yourself, you will probably deny other as well. It goes the other way. It's like love yourself first to love other. So I suppose if you find that you're perpetuating denial about your own good attributes within yourself because your ego's not letting you, to unpack the belief systems that may lie behind that, or the violation of boundaries which may lie behind that, the mental blindness which may lie behind that, and ask sort of like spirit for some sort of resolution, because a lot of people harbour a lot of lies about themselves and perpetuations that are not necessary in this astrological era. The degree to which they hold space is to the degree at which they won't let others hold space is to the degree they won't hold space for themselves. I've seen this firsthand with practical elements I've seen recently. Yeah, you can't, and also you can't hold space for other within yourself. If you don't hold space within yourself, you can't hold space for other. And I suppose to one degree or another, we all hold space in different ways, I would say. But also, if your brokenness in a level, and if your trauma in a level in an area, like, you will probably perpetuate that trauma to someone else, and people don't like it. People will walk against that, and they will, get histrionic about it if it upsets them. And that's a level of conviction as well. It's like, if I'm having this negative interaction, what is it about me where I'm not holding space for myself, and that doesn't resonate for another person? If I somehow perpetuate that to another person, if I sort of hurt people, and vice versa, right? So the anger to which they're happy to evoke in me, second to last one, is to the degree to the anger to which they're happy to evoke in others is the degree they show happy. They're happy to demonstrate their ability to cope and expectation for the anger to which they're happy to evoke anger, I believe that is supposed to be, in others, is to the degree at which they are happy to demonstrate. Okay, The anger to which they're happy to evoke in others is to the degree they're happy to demonstrate their inability to cope and expectations of support for their beliefs and boundary issues. Yes, I think anyone to any degree has some issue with boundaries and beliefs about themselves, and I think anger is just one way to evoke anger in another person. It's just another way to gain control if you don't have control within yourself about your boundaries or your issues and your beliefs. And it's like that level where you see that meme and it's like, stop, go get some help, you know. um and to a level to evoke that in another person is a way to control, to feel a sense of control. And it is in essence a way that your ego kind of screams their inability to cope, and sort of lets everyone know their inability to cope, lets yourself know your inability to cope and your expectation for support and beliefs for their belief for your own beliefs and boundaries, even if they don't resonate, even if that's not necessary. And I think it's just to look at someone else if they do try and evoke anger within you because, you know, their inner child is dysregulated and screaming at you to help them navigate their own beliefs and boundaries, to really, if you're an adult or if a child is not someone you're responsible for, to step away and see that as a dysfunction within someone else and a shameful experience that they need to resolve within themselves. Because, you know, the more I individuate at a healthy level, the more, you know, I'm able to, yes, it's nice to give back, but also, you know, especially if you're someone that's been parentified or someone that has experienced narcissistic abuse and things like this, you know, to take on someone else's burdens is unnecessary for the process of life. You don't need to do that. It's also enabling to one degree or another if you perpetuate that something is okay when it's not. They may continue to do it, and that will actually not serve the situation. Perpetuation, they try to create an environment this is the last one, where it does not resonate is to the degree at which they have to cope to preserve their beliefs where they don't resonate for the group, for others in the group. Yeah, basically touched on that already. Yeah, because if you're in a group of people, you can try so hard to perpetuate your beliefs, but it may just not resonate. But yeah, it sounds like a perfect place to end the video. I'm hoping this will be interesting to watch, and I'm going to have a little look at it now. I really hope it is, because I think there's a lot unpacked in it about communication in the new astrological era. But yeah, thanks for listening. I'm sorry if it was a bit rambly and like a lecture. Bye bye.